Last week, we told you about newly discovered evidence from a dead man's hard drive that appears to show that the Trump administration's push to ask about citizenship on the 2020 census was really about increasing the power of white Republican voters during the remap process. That evidence directly contradicts what the Trump administration has said under oath. Oversight Committee Chairman Elijah Cummings is accusing the Trump administration of a cover-up. All of this is happening as the Supreme Court could rule any day now whether to allow the citizenship question to the census. Now, the ACLU notified the court of this evidence last week. This was evidence they didn't have when they first argued this case, by the way. But it is not clear whether the High Court will consider the evidence before making its decision. I want to bring in Dale Ho. He's the director of the ACLU's Voting Rights Project, and he argued the ACLU's case against adding the citizenship question before the Supreme Court back in April. He joins me now. Dale, simple question. You've got new evidence. This is timing of an evidence. You had your opportunity to say your piece. You don't have it. What happens if the Supreme Court agrees with the Justice Department today, which said, hey, this is just trying to, they shouldn't need it, this evidence is frivolous, et cetera. If the court won't view this evidence in deciding this decision, what do you do next?
Well, right now, this evidence isn't in the formal record before the Supreme Court. Now, I think it would be a mistake for the Supreme Court to pass judgment on what's happened before the truth comes out. And we had a very disturbing revelation within the last week or so. Evidence, newly discovered documents, which is the clearest evidence to date that the administration's purpose in adding a citizenship question was not, as it has been saying, to enforce the Voting Rights Act, but rather to reduce the political clout of minority communities. And we need to get to the bottom of what's happened here, I think, rather quickly.
By the way, let me ask you on the merits on this. Is there the issue of asking about citizenship? I know there was a study done that said it would undercount Latinos and African Americans by as much as 4 million. Is there any sort of middle ground here where it's an optional question to ask or there's no penalty for saying you're not? Is there any middle ground here that makes this a feasible idea at all?
I don't think so. You are required to respond to the census and you're required to answer all questions accurately and completely. So the issue before the court really is whether or not this question can lawfully be a part of the census. Now, up until now, the legal argument has been a pretty technical, dry question about whether or not the administration has followed proper procedures under the Administrative Procedures Act. But I think right now, in light of this new evidence, it's time that we all just got real. I mean, I don't think there's a single person who's watching this show who thinks that the administration is going through all of this trouble, is willing to spend tens of millions of dollars to change the once-in-a-decade census, go all the way up to the Supreme Court so that they can enforce the Voting Rights Act. And what we now have are the receipts that show that their goal was, in fact, the opposite, to undermine the political power of minority communities.
I hear you on this. Do you accept the Justice Department's argument that because that this evidence might not have actually been allowed in a trial, it would have been seen as hearsay?
I don't think so. What we have, I think at this point already demonstrated is that at least 2 Trump administration officials testified untruthfully. You have the acting head of the Civil Rights Division saying that he was the author of the Department of Justice's request to add a citizenship question to the census. We know that's not true. It was actually a man named Mark Newman, who's been described by the administration as a trusted advisor to Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross, who has oversight of the census. Now, Mr. Newman testified that he got the idea for a citizenship question from Thomas Hofeller, and he told us that Thomas Hofeller said that adding the question would maximize Hispanic voting rights. We now know from Dr. Hofeller's files that he concluded exactly the opposite, that he wanted to add a citizenship question because it would, in his words, be advantageous for Republicans and non-Hispanic whites in redistricting to the detriment of communities of color. That evidence is now clear. These witnesses have made misrepresentations to the district court. We have a hearing tomorrow to try to get to the bottom of what happened. And that's really what we need to do here first, I think, Chuck, is let's let the truth come out. And once we establish what the truth is, we'll take it from there as to what, if anything, needs to happen to the actual record in this case.
Is there an avenue via Congress that you can go if the Supreme Court upholds the Trump administration's ability to add this question?
Well, Congress has a hard time, I think, right now passing legislation on almost anything. We've had a hard time just paying our bills as a government. So I think the notion that Congress is going to take action on this, I'd love to see it happen. I'm not holding my breath.
Dale Ho, who argued this case on behalf of the ACLU in front of the Supreme Court, I'm trying to remember the last time where we think the decision may have already been written, and now they have to decide whether this new evidence should undo all of that. Dale Ho, thank you for coming on and sharing your views. I appreciate it. Hello, YouTubers. If you're watching this, it means you've checked out our channel, so thank you. Now do me a favor, subscribe by clicking on that button down there. Click on any of the videos to watch the latest interviews and highlights from MTP Daily and MSNBC. You can get more Meet the Press content every morning in the First Read newsletter. If you're tired of content that you don't know anything about where it came from, you don't have to have that problem with us. NBC News, MSNBC, MTP, and the Meet the Press mindset right here for you on YouTube. Subscribe now.